Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan battle video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at the best offensive abilities in Dokkan battle and which ones I think you should prioritize whenever you are building a team or you want to have a more offensive based team. Now here I'm including effects that occur on the effect of the actual super attack or attack. I will not be including things like nuking units, for example, because obviously that's a situational condition. I will be including things like stuns, seals and interruptions, but I will not be including active skills. So anything basically that you can do to the enemy during the course of your super attack, whether that's crit them, seal them, stun them, etc. Things like lowering attack and lowering defense will be included in a utility based section later on, as these do occur on hit, but they are slightly more mechanical in nature and only reference to certain events. But in terms of the most potent ability, the best place to start is critical hits, and critical hits are by far and away the most potent offensive ability for a couple reasons. The reason why a critical hit is super duper powerful is because of two things. One, it's the highest multiplier in the game at a 1.9 effect, but it also ignores the enemy's type and ignores their defense. This is very, very, very important. Not only does it allow you to attack against certain typings of units, but it also allows you to ignore the large amount of defense. It does not ignore damage reduction, but it will ignore defense. So for example, if I have 170,000 as my attack and I attack an enemy that has 100k defense, it will ignore that defense and then apply the full 170,000 with a 1.9 times modifier. So it's pretty big. The big thing with crits though is that most of them are chance based. I think very few units have auto critting as a capability, except for AGL Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta, and that's part of the reason why he looks so impressive offensively. It elevates your attack stats to a huge degree. Often you'll see units do 15 million attack stats, but not do too much damage, unless they crit. And the reason because of this is because when you crit, you ignore not only the base type neutral modifier of 1, but you immediately ignore any kinds of modifiers for damage reduction. There's also certain situations with units that fire on super attack, like the 6th year anniversary units. It's important to understand that should Vegeta or Goku or any of these units above proc on their first crit, they will immediately crit on all their follow-up attacks as well. So it's very important to understand that. The second ability, but close behind, is attacks effective against all types. This one's pretty obvious, and I think the first two are always going to be super obvious. Attacks effective against all types is just a pure 1.5 modifier, but it also allows you to ignore type differences. So it doesn't add on to the ignore type differences, so you don't get a 1.5 modifier on top of a type difference modifier. You just get the 1.5 flat base against everyone. And this is very good. It's more effective with higher attack stats. So because crit bypasses defense, you can imagine it requiring a lower attack stat. For example, if I have 100k defense on the enemy and a 200k attack stat, I only need to do with a 100k defense, with a 100k attack stat, I can still crit and bypass that enemy's defense and do damage. But with a 100k attack stat with a 1.5 modifier, I will only be doing 50k damage on top of that. So it is just important to understand that the higher the attack stat, the more effective the super effective against all types will be. And that obviously, doesn't sound like rocket science, but because there's no bypassing of defense, it means that even units that have effective against all types but have very low attack stats still will struggle to bypass certain units' defenses. Having a unit that does a 900k super doesn't really matter. But units with huge attack stats like Beast Gohan, the SS4 Gogeta, or even just any of the major Gogeta LRs, or especially the Super Saiyan Gogeta that recently got a ZZA, all of these units will be fine when it comes to their attack stats, and thus their effective against all types will still be pretty relevant and pretty noticeable. It's just important to understand that it's not something that guarantees huge damage, until you kind of break that threshold of the amount of attack that you have. So then the next capabilities kind of pop up, and now you start to look at things that are what I guess you could consider more utility based. There's also things like special conditions like rage forms, ape forms, rage conditions, all these sort of things. But for me personally, what I like to consider, or like I said, more offensive based mechanics, is I want to look at things like interrupts, which I think are very, very important, and I think these are the third most important offensive based ability. A lot of people will say, isn't it utility? Technically yes, but I think for me it's an offensive based ability because you use it to attack the enemy. It occurs upon your active, it occurs upon your super attack, and if you die before this goes off, you're not going to be able to fire it off. So it's an offensive capability. It occurs upon attack or upon active. So for me, it's more of a offensive type of ability. And for me, interruptions or disabling of actions is better than stunning. Now, it only affects one singular action by the enemy. For example, will only interrupt one of their attacks or one of their supers, and you can't really tell which of those you're affecting. Sometimes you can even interrupt nothing. But the thing is it's far more malleable than stunning. Stunning is only useful in ESPR and SPR, whereas interruption is useful in all forms of content except for Extreme Z battles. So for me, I personally find that interruptions has to be the third best, just simply because of its versatility, and it can be pretty clutch. Especially if you start piling up 1 or 2 interruptions, you can have some really good turns where you can interrupt the enemy enough that you start to get really good damage out. Then we look at stunning. So stunning is a better form of interruption. Stunning from your super attack lasts for 2 turns, and stunning from your passive will generally last for 1 turn unless stated. But the big thing with stunning the enemy is that it will not only prevent the rest of their actions for this turn, but it will actually prevent their actions for the next turn as well. And that's very powerful. I think people will notice it from the Gamma 1 and Gamma 2 red zone, where you can kind of stun and seal them. It kind of almost trivializes the content, like being able to stun a unit and stop them from just doing anything is incredibly potent and incredibly powerful. And in SBR and ESBR, it's always so apparent how good it is, but it is something that's very, very good. Behind that, and close behind that, is sealing. The reason sealing is behind stunning, although sealing is generally not chance based, stunning is something that always has a chance associated with it. Very few units guarantee stun. Sealing units is guaranteed, however it only prevents their ability to fire super attacks. So generally speaking, it won't stop you taking damage from normals, but it's still a very powerful ability that allows you to prevent any of those massive super attacks, and it's super duper apparent now in events like ESBR, SBR, and even some red zones, that the ability to seal a unit's super attacks and not have fear of being one-shot KO'd or taking huge damage is super duper powerful. And then finally, the last mechanic I believe is really good offensively is all target super attacks. Now, all target super attacks, again, something more SBR and ESBR related, World Tournament related as well. But there's a reason why all targeting super attack units are generally nerfed to a certain extent. Their attack stats are reduced, their passives are kind of changed, because they just can, to a certain extent, trivialize an entire group of content, being ESBR and SBR. They just do huge damage. Like the ability to hit multiple targets at once in the stages where you're fighting with 3, 4, or 5 enemies and potentially critting, insta-killing those units, doing huge damage to them, stunning them in the case of Maj and Vegeta. It's a very potent ability, and I think for the most part it's something that, although maybe specifically tied to one type of content, you can see how effective it is in that content. But that's it from me. Let me know what you guys think. Love to hear your thoughts compared to mine, what you think some of the best abilities are. But that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.